My parents placed me for adoption as a child because I was a boy. After 20 years, they contacted me again, this time asking for money to pay for my sister's education. I am a 25-year-old male. My narrative began when I was 6 years old, or more precisely, when I was born. I'm my parents' third and youngest kid. We weren't rich, but my parents made enough money to support 3 children. We resided in a tiny town in an ancestral home, which let us save a lot of money. Grandparents possessed a farm that met a large percentage of our kitchen needs. Dad is a truck driver who returns home every 3 or 4 days. Mom works as a waiter. My parents already have 2 daughters. My conception was unplanned. And you know how parents react when an unplanned child appears. Obviously, I was unaware of all of this as a child, but as I grew older, I began to understand these concepts in bits and pieces, and it was unpleasant to know that I was unwelcome. My parents wanted to get rid of me, but the doctor advised against it because it could have caused serious health issues for my mother. My parents, particularly my mother, preferred a girl. Her motive was simple. Mom wanted me to wear my older siblings' discarded clothes so that she wouldn't have to buy new things for me. My 2 older sisters had a year of age difference. Therefore, they wore the same size clothes interchangeably. It was enjoyable for them. However, when I was born a boy, my parents were unhappy. They despised my guts. They dressed me in girls' clothes and even sent me to school wearing my sister's abandoned uniform. It was very embarrassing for me as a child. Though I was very tiny at the time, I have a vague memory of being ridiculed for wearing a girl's uniform and having long hair. If I complained about it, my mother thrashed me. My parents constantly abused me and spoke harshly to me, most of which I couldn't understand. And once I understood, I despised my parents. Dad was still better than Mom, although he was often absent and unpredictable. On some days, I thought he was neutral between the 3 of us, but on others, he was as wicked as Mom, if not more so. I'm not going to say I was a saintly kid. I used to revolt when I realized their prejudices toward me and my sisters. They always got the finest of everything, while I got the leftovers. So I started being mean to them since as a child, I blamed them for my suffering. Yes, I was held accountable for my behavior, sometimes severely. I had to make my own breakfast and was often left without dinner. Understand a 6-year-old's pleas in this situation. There was one episode that I recall vividly, and I believe it changed my life. I don't recall what day or week it was, but I was being brutally abused in the playground for dressing up as a girl. When I arrived home, I discovered that my mother had brought some new clothes for my sisters for the holidays. I grabbed a pair of scissors and sliced them into confetti. I realize I was evil, and I'm not proud of what I did, but I was 6 years old and subjected to trolling due to my parents' actions. It originated from a place of grief, not wickedness. Instead of comprehending my pain, my parents saw it as a sin worthy of the harshest punishment possible. They placed me up for adoption. They waited a month, but there were no takers, and their rage was directed against me. I was repeatedly taught that I am useless and that no one wants me. There were moments when I heard my mother say, "I wish I had gender checked. I would never have brought him into the world." It pains me that my parents despise me so much for reasons beyond my control. After a while, when there was no response to my adoption, they began discussing it with their friends and relatives. Dad knew someone in the next town who had a food truck with his wife. They were poorer than us, yet they desired a child. They were in their late 30s and had been trying for a child for almost a decade, but there had been no success. Dad spoke with them, and they easily consented to adopt me. I recall how my father broke the news to my mother and sisters. They were overjoyed to get free of me. Dad also explained that they were poor and that I might never be able to attend school. Mom shrugged her eyes and muttered, "Who cares? Just drop him there tomorrow." I stood in the corner, numbly gripping the curtain. Regardless of how much I despised my family, I was terrified and hurt to leave them. I had tears in my eyes but did not cry out. They were so thrilled and enjoying the occasion that they forgot I was there. When Dad saw me in tears, he walked forward, rubbed my back and said, "Pack your stuff. We'll leave tomorrow morning for your new family." I wept out loudly, but I realized it was going unheard. So I went to my room, packed my belongings, and prayed that my new family was less evil. The following day, Dad drove me to the next town. I don't remember exactly what emotions I was experiencing, but I wasn't crying. Perhaps I was simply numb as I left the house and throughout the drive. My new family was definitely poor. They lived in a little house with only one room. They'd converted the warehouse into my room. I had no problems because they at least tried to offer me a room. I've never had my own room or bed. My sisters had a bed, and I was put up on a cot in the corner of their room with my stuff stored in a small closet. This room was smaller than ours, yet it was comfortable. My new parents, Mary and John, were loving and caring, but I came from a troubled home. I had never felt that love before. Yes, I watched my parents show love to my sisters, but never to me. I used to question my new parents' intentions and assume their love was only transitory. I tried not to become attached to them for fear of being abandoned as well. You are aware of childhood trauma. It took me several months to discover that they truly loved me and were not putting on a front. Yes, my school was discontinued that year since my parents relocated me in the middle of the school year, but my new parents promised to enroll me next year. I saw how they went above and beyond to save money so that I could attend school. That's when I started to love them back. My adoption proved to be a blessing in disguise. My original parents never showed up after sending me to Mary and John. To be honest, I was relieved because I was treated as if I were still a boy. Mary and John were extremely hard-working people. They worked 14 to 16 hours every day on their food truck. The truck was close to their apartment, so I wasn't left alone while they were working. I could see them directly through my bedroom window. Eventually, I began spending my days on the truck, assisting them with everything I could. When I was admitted to the school, I dedicated all of my time to my studies while also assisting them with chores when I had time. I was a little older than 10 when I assisted John at the cash desk. I was rather adept at calculating. I learned business and accounting at a young age. After high school, I wanted to run their business full-time, but they both insisted that I finish college first. They used their funds to fund it. They were becoming too old and frail to operate a food truck. I wanted to assume their responsibilities the same way they took mine, but they told me that they could handle it for a few more years and that I should go to college. I studied business and accounting in college because I aspired to be an entrepreneur. My graduation day was the best day of my life. John and Mary were over the moon. They even asked my biological parents to attend the convocation, but they did not show up. After college, I wanted to manage the food van while Mary and John retired, but they had other plans for me. They had acquired significant savings, which John handed over to me. This act overwhelmed me. He stated that they could manage on their own for a few more years, but they didn't want to include me in this. He provided me with the money to start my own business. I did not want to waste his money, so I applied my business knowledge. I looked for a tiny local cafe in a favorable location that was struggling with sales. I asked the owner to lease it to me on a profit-sharing basis. After a few rejections, I received one. I started from scratch, redesigned the space and cuisine to cater to the tastes of millennials and Generation Z, and provided the best customer service. Within a year, sales increased dramatically, and I profited twice as much as I had invested. After 4 years, I now have 3 profitable cafes in town. I upgraded Mary and John to a better flat. I obtained a small space for myself. I'd been living with them until now. I asked them to get rid of their food truck and enjoy their retirement, but they insisted on keeping it for their own enjoyment. When I left the house with my bag, I never believed I'd be a college graduate. But here I am, running a restaurant chain in town. Fast forward to last month, and it was a typical workday. I was at the pay register at one of the restaurants when I noticed a familiar face. I felt as if I had seen a ghost. That was my biological father. I saw him after nearly 2 decades. He appeared pale and sickly. He stepped across the counter, smiling broadly, and hugged me. There were customers in the store, so I didn't say anything and led him to the corner. His face brought back all the traumatic memories from my youth. I couldn't have written such specifics about my history if they hadn't reappeared in my life. He expressed his happiness and pride at seeing me succeed in life. I wasn't sure what to say. I stood there, numb. He stated he was passing by and saw John, who informed him of my successful endeavor. He claimed he'd get my mother over the weekend. I didn't say anything, and he departed shortly thereafter. After finishing my day, I approached John and told him that I did not want to meet my original parents, who disowned me because I was a guy. They knew about my difficult childhood. I wanted to go away and hide somewhere for the weekend, but Mary suggested that I forgive my parents and move on. I agreed to meet them under the condition that Mary and John accompany me, so my biological parents arrived at John's home. I expected them to apologize for what they did to me, but they showed no remorse. Instead, they relied on me. Mom told me I should be grateful to them for finding such nice parents for me and raising me to be a successful person. I was astounded to hear that. I intended to return it to them, but Mary took my hand and motioned for me to calm down. I said gently, "I'm blessed to have John and Mary as my parents." The encounter was unpleasant for me. The next day, my mother called me. I did not recognize her voice. How would I do it? It was the first time she had called me in 20 years. There was a demand for money. She explained that Dad had lost his regular job and had been working on a contract basis for several years. She had also lost her job since, allegedly, no restaurant requires a 50-year-old waitress. They had a terrible time making ends meet. I asked how much she needed, and she claimed $20,000 would be enough. She had borrowed that money from her friends over the last few months to buy groceries for the house, and now they were demanding it back, and she had none. I hung up the phone saying, "I'll think about it and get back." Now, as much as I despise them, I feel awful that people are pursuing them for money. Sometimes I think she's simply taking advantage of me, but what if they really need help? Even if I have the money, I will feel horrible about causing them embarrassment. Update 1. Thank you for all of your remarks and congratulations. People had a mixed reaction to my offering to aid my mother with $20,000. I then talked about it with Mary and John. Mary was pleased that I was considering assisting my parents, but she also advised me to be cautious. John claimed it was my money, so I should make the decision. He shared my concern that they could try to exploit my feelings. After much deliberation, I decided to place my first and final wager on my biological parents and transferred the funds to her account. I felt good about being able to aid my family, even though they were cruel to me, but I was mistaken. Perhaps I should claim I was correct, since I feared they would try to use me financially, and they are. A week after sending the money, Mom called me again. I answered with conflicting emotions. She thanked me for my assistance before saying, "Your sisters want to meet you, so when do you think you'll be able to make it?" At that point, I had a strong feeling that my family desired my return. I know my parents wronged me as a child and I despised them, but I never hated my sisters. Maybe as a child, I would have done some awful things to them, but as I grew older, I never held them accountable. It was not their fault. Sometimes I assumed my parents had abandoned me because they were poor, not because they were terrible. I promised Mom we could meet on Sunday and I'd drive home. She interjected, asking, "Why don't we meet somewhere outside?" I didn't think much about it and simply answered, "Okay." She said she'd text the location and time details later. After I hung up, I felt uneasy, as if she didn't want me to visit home. Yes, it doesn't matter where you meet, but if you're meeting your family after so many years, wouldn't you rather call them at home than meet them at a restaurant? Nonetheless, she emailed me information on the restaurant, which was one of the fanciest in town. I didn't think much at the moment because my thoughts were focused on the fact that they hadn't invited me home. I went to a restaurant. They were already present. My sisters raced to hug me. For a minute, I was relieved to see them after so many years. I was having fun catching up with them until the menu arrived and they began ordering their meals. They were purposefully hunting for the most expensive cuisine. When they asked what he wanted, my father simply grinned and responded, "Order the most expensive one." My son is a big man now. That was very petty of him to remark. Had John or Mary said this, I would have been a proud son, but it came from my real parents who were harsh and wicked. There was nothing I could do. I sat there watching them devour the food and raid my wallet. Yes, I did pay the bill, too. I had some wacky ideas, such as ghosting them before the bill, but that would have been too harsh for them. I promised right there that I would never fall into their emotional trap again. I was cold for the remainder of the evening, and I doubt they noticed. They also did not invite me home as they were departing. Instead, my older sister inquired, "So, where are we dining next?" I faked a smile and replied, "Nowhere," before waving them farewell. I returned and told Mary about my greedy family. She was astonished to learn this. She's a very kind and self-sufficient woman. She found all of this quite disturbing. She told me not to be a fool again, not to think too much about them, and to concentrate on my life. I did it. My sisters called me after about a week, but I didn't answer. My mother also called, but I did not answer. It has been 2 months since then, and they have ceased texting and calling me. I believe they got the hint that I didn't want them in my life. Update 2. Hello, everyone. Thank you for all the love. As I indicated in my last essay, I stopped responding to my sisters and biological parents once I realized they only wanted me for the money. She called me back about 5 months later, yesterday. I noticed the phone ringing and answered it spontaneously. She started with a light chat, inquiring about me and my career. It sounded so false and pretentious that I couldn't stand it. I inquired about what she wanted. She took a big breath and said that my sisters had to drop out of college since their father was unable to pay their tuition, so they asked me to fund their studies. I flipped out. She asked me to calm down and told me that they were my sisters and kin and that I should help them. I was at work at the time and didn't want to jumble my thoughts, so I hung up. She contacted me again that evening. I had ignored the call several times, but it was troubling me. I knew that ignoring them was not a solution. The following time she called, I answered. She inquired, "Your sisters are very excited to rejoin their college. So how are we going about it? Will you be paying in one shot or semester-wise? I suggest you transfer the whole amount to me, and I will pay the tuition before each semester. You don't need to take the trouble," I responded. "Woohoo! Hold on, lady, I'm not going to make any payments." She was so taken aback. She hadn't expected "no" as a reply. She inquired, "What do you mean you don't want to give it a shot? It's fine. We can manage in installments as well." I quipped, "I don't want to pay it either way. My elder sister's education is not my responsibility, especially when my parents abandoned me and never checked up on me. Even now, you guys are talking to me just because you could leech on my money." She broke down in tears when she heard my comments. She said, "Don't you forget that we birthed you. Whatever you are, it is because of us. Your dad found a good guardian for you. And now that it's your time to repay us, you cannot shy away from your responsibilities. Your sisters and your parents are your responsibilities, and you have to take care of all of us." I had a lot to say, but it was falling on deaf, narcissistic ears. I simply replied, "Well, yes, I do owe a lot to my parents, that is, John and Mary. They deserve all the credit for my success. And for you guys, I don't know who you are. None of my documents have your name, nor do I have any photographs with you folks, so I don't think I know you all." She was yelling abuse at me. I replied, "Wrong number, lady," before hanging up. Now, whatever you call me, selfish, cruel, or whatever, I am not going to spend my hard-earned money on my so-called family. They were not my relatives. They got rid of me when I was only 6 years old. And yes, I received criticism in my last updates that I referred to John and Mary by their names rather than Mom and Dad. Actually, I named them Mom and Dad. Not right away after meeting them, but after they got me to school, worked hard to meet my needs, and showed me love. I became attached to them and addressed them as Mom and Dad. For the convenience of recounting, I will refer to them by their names. John and Mary are my biological parents, and I don't refer to them by any names. They do not exist for me.